Come with me to a magical place where being labeled the pork queen is a compliment, where being nice is just a way of life, and where all leaders of the free world must pass through. Welcome to Iowa. Whether you're a current Iowan, an Iowa expat, or an Iowan at heart, this show is for you. This is the Iowa Podcast. Real Iowans, real talk, no drama. From the Jethro's Barbecue Studio, I'm Justin Brady, and when the crap hits the fan, when everything goes to you-know-what, the guy we call is John Benson, the Director of Iowa Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. We're in the middle of flood season. Derecho. I get this wrong. Every time I say it, derecho. I think it's derecho season.
Derecho's good enough.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on the show and helping us all prepare and understand what's going on. Appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
So before we get started, everybody, Jethro's Barbecue is the sponsor. We love the heck out of them. If you go to their website, or go to our website, iowapodcast.com, scroll to the top, click the banner, buy a $100 gift card, you get a $30 gift card for free. Or you can just go there to Jethro's and say, hey, we listened to the Iowa Podcast and we love it. Tell them that like a gajillion times, and then they'll be like, yeah, we should keep advertising on the Iowa Podcast. So make sure you do that. Director Benson, obviously appreciate you coming here. One of the things everyone's kind of top of mind is the Camp Mystic thing in Texas. Now, obviously, Iowa's not Texas, but is that something that could happen here?
Well, in this time of year, even in the spring, when you're talking about flash flood, yes. You can have flash flooding in the winter, too, if you think about frozen ground doesn't absorb water. It's got to run off somewhere. So, yeah, a flash flood can happen. Now, we don't have a lot of the geography that you would see in the Camp Mystic, where you have a fairly narrow river valley. But you've seen similar things like that. Boulder Canyon out in Colorado kind of had the exact same experience. So, yeah, it can happen. My grandmother grew up in Clarion. They had a flash flood. There's not a river or a creek anywhere near that thing, but enough rain and enough in a small spot, yeah, you can have flash flooding anywhere.
So that's basically what it is. It's just a high concentration of rain, doesn't get absorbed, doesn't run off anywhere, and creates that. Like, that's literally all it is?
Yeah, that's pretty much what it gets down to. And you hit it right on the nut, is that you've got a lot of rain falling in a very short period of time. And in the case of a city, usually the storm sewers can't handle it. Mm-hmm. They can't process that amount of water. Used to have that problem up in Beaverdale, but the city's fixed that. And so it can impact any town. Even you can get out into the rural areas. How many times have people in Iowa driven around after a rainstorm and the ditches are full of water? Well, that's a flash flood effect as well. You can see entire farm fields washed out. I was driving by Hyperion Golf Course the other day after we had some rain, and the way that course is laid out, they actually have water that runs through it all the way off the course. So, yeah, it can happen anywhere.
I think the unpredictability of it is the problem, because we generally teach each other and teach our kids safety things. Look both ways before crossing the street, just basic stuff. Right. And there's always a street there. The street doesn't move. There's always high-speed traffic. I think the concern with flash floods is it almost seems like they end up in unpredictable areas and people almost short circuit because they're planning and the general things they know to be safe. Like, they're just like, wait, what do I do in this situation? Is that kind of the problem we run into?
I think it is. And part of the issue you're talking about there is, and one of the things we preach with regard to preparedness is understand A, where you're at, and B, what are the hazards that could impact you? So in the case of a flash flood, obviously you want to be paying attention to the weather reports as they come in. And National Weather Service has to give them a lot of credit. They are getting really, really good at predicting rainfall rates, things of that nature, and the impact those rainfall rates are going to have. So one of the most important things you can do as an individual is understand the hazards that are in your area that could impact you. Obviously around here, earthquake doesn't make any sense, right? Right. So, yeah. But if you think about, the big boys we have around here, tornado. Okay, Nobody's going to miss a tornado. Everybody's paying attention to that. Your river flooding, that usually comes on slow, right? And then your flash flooding, which comes on fast. So you've got tornado and flash flood that are two rapid onset disasters that you can have. So you can take a little personal responsibility for yourself in terms of, okay, is this a hazard I should be paying attention to? What's National Weather Service saying? Always pay attention to that type of stuff, because if you understand what the possibility of the impact might be to you, even just having that knowledge makes you far better prepared than say, oh, I had no idea it was coming. That's really step number one in getting yourself prepared to, effectively respond to this type of stuff.
Yeah, I want to talk about the preparedness stuff. And then you mentioned Beaverdale fixing it, and we're going to get into that too, because I have a lot of questions around that, because that's like a loaded statement. But preparedness thing, I think one of the challenges is if we just do a web search for how to prepare in my area or what risks are in my area, we're hit with so much Google and search engine junk. And it's like most of it's useless. Most of it's other websites trying to scrape content and sell ads. So if I'm I live on the east side of Des Moines, and I generally think I know what's safe in that area. My brother has an office, Brady Dental Care, former sponsor of the show, but they have an office like right by 4 Mile Creek.
Okay.
And so my brother is very aware. Their business got flooded out years ago. So he's very aware of that risk. But where would I mean, this isn't a leading question at all. Where do I actually go to find very specific information about the risks on like Des Moines' east side? Where do I find that stuff?
So one of the best ways you can actually do that is when you find yourself new into a neighborhood, talk to your neighbors. Because your long-term neighbors,
really good advice.
If the folks that have lived there long-term are going to tell you what the hazards are. So as you were talking about 4 Mile Creek, anybody that's been over there for any appreciable amount of time is going to be, they can probably rattle off the number of times the creek has come out of its bed and flooded that area out. Because you've probably been over there and you've seen the city has taken steps where they've bought homes out and returned that to green space, right? So now the flood can wander around when it comes out of the creeks, and it doesn't get into housing as much as it used to. But that's really, that local knowledge is where the key is. Now, if you want to get deeper into it, you could start, in the case of flood, you could get on and Google like what is the floodplain map for where I'm at. And that'll pull up a federal FEMA flood map. Yep.
Oh.
And you could go through there and figure out, is my house in the floodplain, not in the floodplain? Am I in the 100-year or the 500-year? Am I not in a floodplain? Things like that. So there's things like that out there. If you really wanted to deep dive on stuff, you can even figure out, what type of hazardous materials do I have around me? A lot of times people don't even think about that type of stuff.
Wow.
So it's asking the right questions, and like I said, the best place to start is truly with those neighbors that have been there a while, because they can tell you what's in the neighborhood, what's immediately around you. That's one of the things that I've always learned whenever I haven't moved a ton, but when I have moved, local knowledge is the best knowledge.
It's funny you say that, because I think that's the first chunk of advice most people will discount. They're like, well, I need official sources. I'm not just going to go ask my neighbor. But one of Toyota design principles, one of the principles that made them a world famous brand, is an idea called Genshi Jinbutsu, which is loosely translated. I don't speak Japanese, but loosely translated is go look, go see. And they just knew that if you just go ask people on the ground in an area, they'll give you incredible insights. And the more people you ask, the more refined those insights. So as simple as that sounds, asking your neighbors, hey, tell me about what are the emergencies here, flash flooding, natural emergencies, what are the things I should be concerned of because I'm new in the area?
Right.
That's really good advice. And I hope people don't discount that.
Well, and I can even give you an example for myself personally. Last summer, as we were working through the floods up in northwest Iowa, we were working on doing some housing missions, right? And it was getting into a discussion with FEMA on respective elevation of a property, right? And so it showed a number of the elevation showed up on a flood map. And so we're up there working, and it's like, oh, it's too low. And there was a local guy who ran garbage service, mowed lawns, did all this kind of stuff. And he said, that number's wrong. You're like, what? He said, no. He goes, that elevation number is wrong.
I love that.
And so he said, and long story short, he basically said it's wrong. This is what it is. Get it verified. So we actually had DOT run out, reshoot it, develop the elevation. Map was wrong. Oh. And we wouldn't have figured that out if that local guy
didn't speak up.
Yeah. So, trusting local knowledge is is probably one of the best resources you got.
Yeah, and it's just this elitist mentality. It's like, no, we have to research it and take it into the university setting and all this stuff. And sure, that's the case sometimes, but don't discount local knowledge. You, what are, just like to check this thing on the box at the top of the show, like what are those things that people need to do? Because I think some people, Iowa is a well-run state. We have you in positions to address things, but the harsh reality, you know, and I know, is if all the crap hits the fan, there in some cases you're not making it to someone's doorstep in a few days, right? Like that can happen.
Yep.
And so if people are putting their faith in a governing body that's just going to always be there at their door to meet their needs, you're screwed. And so what are the things people need to do at their own house, in their community, to prepare themselves? Because eventually the cavalry always does come, but what do they have to do to make sure that they can get to that point when the cavalry does come?
So it really gets down to three very basic, very simple principles for you. And we've already discussed the one is understand the hazards you've got in your area. Pay attention to what's going on. I can tell there's multiple times I've been walking around, I'm going to say large cities that have levees on the rivers, right? Water's up on the levee. It's maybe 2-3 feet from the top. And you can walk around town. There's people that don't even know that the water's on the levee. And I'm like, okay, you pay attention. But so understand the hazards.
It's like being in a burning building, like, it just feels a little warm.
Yeah, pay attention to what the hazards are, you know. So like if you've got a blizzard coming, you know, back in the day when Dawes was still here, he used to refer that when a blizzard warning went out, that was the attack of the blue hares at Dawes, right? Because old people say, blizzard's coming, I may be stuck in my house for a week to 10 days. I got to go get groceries. Off they go.
Yeah.
Same principle, right? So understand what the hazards are. Then if something does happen
Are we
to
on
your
number
house,
2 now?
We're on number 2.
Okay, number 2.
Number 2. So one thing you need to always be considering, you were touching on this, is that if I have to get out of my house, like quickly, or what do I need to take with me? What is really those viable pieces of information that I have to have with me that allow me to, I'm going to use the phrase, still live.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Still function.
I understand that.
You know, so you need to be thinking about, okay, do I have medications I need to take with me? Do I need to take credit cards, financial instruments, things of that nature? Should you take if you have your house deed, should you take the deed with you?
Oh.
Because it may disappear in a flood. Or think about fire. If you still have your house deed. You know, what are those relevant documents that you need? You know, identification things of that nature, driver's license, passport. You know, real simple things that you need. What about your pet? You're going to leave. You're not going to take you're not going to leave your pet there, right? So what do you have to do to support your pet for a period of time? Some people will say, think 3 days, think 7 days, think 10 days. You know, you make that choice yourself based on what you're seeing and what you know. You know, so make those preparations and have it ready to go now. Don't think, oh my God, I'm going to run around. I've got to get this and this. You'll forget something.
Sure, yeah.
Think in advance what you have to do. If that means giving yourself a checklist to walk down, okay, I've got everything. I can go out the door. I know I'm good. And then the last part of that equation, so we're on to number 3.
Number 3,
is have a plan in terms of what you're going to do. It's one thing to walk out the door. What are you doing when you walk out the door?
Sure.
So where are you going to go? Where are you, if it's in a case of flood, are you going to friends? Are you going to go to a shelter?
Oh, you even know the location you're going ahead of time.
Yeah, so because think about it, and also take that plan and communicate it to other people. So if you're not home, they're not going, oh, crap, he's not here, something terrible has happened. No, check where you're supposed to go first. Years ago, I kind of did a half-joking video for the department where talking about these same planning principles, and we did it based on the zombie apocalypse.
But you try to make it a little lighthearted, but also serious.
But the principles are always the same. You got to have a plan about what you're going to do, where you're going to end up at, what do you got to take with you, and obviously in that case, it's a zombie. You know, the zombies are the problem. I'm a older guy. I would have preferred to do Godzilla, but
yeah.
You know, how does that put all of those together, and how does that work? Make that work for you. And then, and the last thing, and this really isn't even a number 4. This is just a generic emergency management thing. Exercise it. Practice doing it one time.
Wow.
Because you want to have some muscle memory in there, because in a high stress situation, if you don't have the muscle memory, you end up making mistakes.
Sure. Yeah, that's true.
It's really that simple. It's that simple. Having that personal responsibility to yourself and your family already puts you ahead of the game, puts you in a much better position to get to safety, to be, get yourself out of harm and into a safe environment.
I used to do live radio, and I would take callers, and people would ask me, like, how do you, in real time, like, how are you so quick on your feet with these callers? They bring up all these different things. They kind of debate you on, so how did you, and I was like, I don't think on my feet that well. I actually battle planned out like 1,000 different variations of what questions were already coming, and I was already ready for them. And so even for people that seem like they think on their feet and they're really, really quick, you probably don't. When it comes to a flood or an emergency, people tunnel vision, they panic, they shut down. And so that's why ahead of time, have the plan, have a list, walk through it, get the muscle. That's super, super smart stuff. ESA, right? The ESA, can control, it allows the federal government through the FCC and FEMA to control all communications. And EAS.
EAS.
Sorry, I got it. Yeah,
I know where you're going. Just had the
you're
acronyms
like, he'll get it eventually. So the EAS. Has this changed with technology? Because people they're not maybe listening to radio all the time. People are cutting the cable. Some people don't have access. Like my house, it's actually really hard to get like an antenna signal because there's like a water tower blocking it or whatever. So are we seeing the EAS change with technology? Like, should people still get an old school, like tunable radio with batteries in it?
The generic answer I'll give you is yes. And the reason I say that is
because that's what we have at my house.
I'll go backwards for you for a second. So if you think about that radio, that's one way of receiving some emergency messaging, right? You talked about the EAS system for old people, the old EBS system. Interrupts your radio, interrupts TV, even gets on cable these days, right? So that's another way of receiving messages. But all of that stuff, when you talk about alerting, it fits under this federal umbrella. The acronym is IPAWS. It's Integrated Public Alert and Warning System. So you've got your EAS system in there. The other big one that's in there is what they refer to as the Wireless Emergency Alert System. So if you've ever been around and you've had a tornado warning, and this
pushes
thing
through the phone.
Sounds like your phone's going to explode.
Yep.
Okay, that's another way of getting messages, right? There are any number of alerting apps out there. Even the TVs do it. We also have a statewide alerting system called Alert Iowa, where you can receive text messages, emails, however you would want to get it.
Oh, you can choose that.
Yeah. So you have multiple different ways of getting emergency messaging. Radio being one of them. So the one thing I noticed about the discussion down in Texas is they talked about we need flood warning sirens, right?
Really?
It's an outdoor. Up here they're called tornado sirens.
Right.
They're both wrong.
Huh.
They're an outdoor warning system.
Oh,
and their sole purpose in life is, if you're outdoors, is to get your attention and then go to another source to find out what is going on. Because like around here, it could be for a tornado warning. I believe in Polk County, they do high wind warnings. So if we're going to have wind in excess of, I think it's either 70 or 75, I may have the number wrong, but very high wind, it goes off. Around nuclear power plants, they have outdoor warning systems. It has nothing to do with tornado, can be used for that. But it's really that purpose of getting you to pay attention to another media source to get further detail, to trigger a reaction out of you.
It's not meant to go in your basement.
No.
That's not the point. The point of the sirens, everybody,
find
is
out what's going on.
Something's going on. You better figure it out because your life may depend on it.
So that has been an interesting discussion I've watched down in Texas, because they're focused solely on the flood aspect of it. And truthfully, it's just an outdoor warning system to get you to pay attention to what else is going on. And then the last one you put in there, so, we've talked about radio, we've talked about getting alerts on your phone using the state alerting system. You can even get access through other apps. Well, the other one that's a big one is National Weather Service and their weather radios. So you get those, you key your location in, and so any alert that happens in there, it's gonna make this god-awful noise. I mean, it would wake up a dead person. But
which is what you want.
It'll have that information from the Weather Service in terms of what's going on. So like we have one in our office here in Des Moines, right? So anytime any type of severe weather warning happens, that thing's going off. Now, it's irritating and bothersome. However, It's correct. And so it's getting you information. So I'm getting information at work. I'm getting it from the weather service. I'm getting it on my phone through an alerting system. And if I've got the radio on, I'm listening to the radio. So my guidance is this: don't rely upon a single source to get your warning information, because it's a system. Systems fail. Have multiple systems that get you there.
That's a good point. So one thing that's interesting, and I was turning on the local radio station during their like, I think it was a week ago, there were some tornado sirens here in Polk County. And our phones actually alerted us because it was like 6 a.m. or something. I don't remember. It was really early.
No, I remember that morning. It was a Saturday or a Sunday. I think it might have been a Sunday.
So we were going to sleep in. Of course, that didn't happen. But the phone jolted us right up. The phone, I think, beat the tornado sirens by a few minutes, which is really cool. But I turned on the radio through my app and noticed that there was nothing on there. Just normal programming. Everything's fine.
May not have been anybody in the studio.
Well, and this is my question, is I always thought like the EAS system overrode local programming, whether or not there's anybody in the studio. But now I'm kind of wondering, was it like the EAS only goes over airwaves, so digital wasn't affected, or how does the EAS work?
I would have to get my technical person in here to explain that, because when EBS migrated into the EAS environments, and it used to be, in the simplest of terms, WHO downtown, the 50,000 watt blowtorch, that was your primary station for the entire state, because every station in the state could hear that, and then it just kind of daisy chained when an alert went out. Well, as they moved into a digital environment, I believe, and I'll have to check to make this sure, but some stations are on, some stations are not. And then that automatic override, if they're not on, you wouldn't hear the automatic override happen.
So it might be a case of, if I was listening to the AM band, it would have overrode and I would have heard it. But because I was listening through the website, there was no EAS override.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And so
use your old school tech.
That's
is what
why.
it kind of comes
that's
down
why
to.
the point of having multiple avenues,
Sources,
being able to receive information, because at any given point in time, one of those original sources may fail, or may not. It may not even be the right source at the right time.
What about comms? Because cell phone towers go down. Because everyone's like, well, cell phone towers, they're not hooked to wires. I'm like, well, the towers are.
They get into a wire at some point.
So it has to go to a wire somewhere. Obviously, Starlink might be an exception there. But and I've actually seen a lot of Starlinks being used for emergency response. So that's kind of a hopeful. I don't know if we use that here. I guess that's a side question. Do we use any Starlink stuff in Iowa for emergency response?
Presently, my office does not. But we have a lot of secondary capabilities that, I mean, obviously, we do rely upon cell phone usage, but as you noted, it's not uncommon for cell towers to.
And I know that you guys have your own special cell phone networks.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Because we don't get those, but emergency response has their own dedicated cell networks.
Yep. And that's part of what they refer to as FirstNet. So you have the ability to get on, as a first responder, you have the ability to get on there and use that. And it's, as you correctly noted, general public cannot be on that chunk of spectrum. It's all public safety operators. So that becomes interesting. But for us, we end up using we do some work on the FirstNet side of the equation, but we also use the statewide public safety radio backbone. And so if we lose phones, we still have the capability to communicate with old push-to-talk radios. And even if we lose that, we even go down a step further where we use amateur radio operators. So your racing guys, the guys at shortwave, and they talk around the world. We'll even use those folks to help us communicate. So if we lose a lot of stuff, a lot of times we still got the shortwave guys sitting there, and we can use them. Have we used them a lot? No.
It's rare.
It's so far down the backup list that we rarely get to them. But have we? Yes.
Wow.
We've had instances where that's been our only way to communicate to a specific county.
They have some of these long-range comms devices that go. You don't need a license, but they can go it's like 50 to 100 miles or something. Like, are these, should families kind of create their own little mini networks and buy some of these things in case crap hits the fan?
I think it's the right question to ask, but my answer would be this, is what's going to work best for your family.
True,
and you need to sit down and put a little thought into it. Just don't, this looks cool, I think we'll buy this, it might work. Ask the question, will it work?
Right.
Is it what your
Don't
family needs?
Don't spend $5,000 on something that when push comes to shove doesn't actually do anything.
Take the time to figure out what is going to be the right way for you to communicate. For me, like when my grandparents alive, it would make absolutely no sense for me to use a cell phone with them because they had no interest in a cell phone.
Oh, sure.
You know?
There's no point.
So how to, figure out how you're going to communicate. And it's just, you just got to just do some good thought process behind it. What's going to be best for you?
You mentioned earlier in something, and this might be actually where we end, but you mentioned earlier Beaverdale fixed it. And so this is one of the things that I think a lot of people don't know is that sometimes flooding, flash flooding, and natural disasters are actually driven by maybe stuff in the past we did that was kind of dumb. Like, I know there was a ton of development up above 4 Mile Creek, and all that development was like basically shoving all water into 4 Mile, which flooded everything below. And so like river systems, lakes, ebb and flow over time. They kind of breathe. If you could look at if you could somehow see a good satellite like live image, you would see that rivers and lakes and natural water systems breathe. They like expand and contract. And then we built really close to them and tried to control them. Of course, when you try to control river systems, the rivers don't like that. And they just say, I don't like your control, screw you. Are we changing how we develop cities and areas to allow for that natural breathing so that we're not surprised all the time?
Absolutely. It's interesting you would bring those points up because you're seeing, the city of Des Moines, obviously when they were working on the Beaverdale storm sewer system, but they recognized doesn't have the capacity for the way it's built. So they increased capacity. And anecdotally, you don't hear as much concern up there now in terms of when they get a heavy rainfall, streets flooding out. You saw a lot of the same things in the city of Dubuque. They recognized that the way the city was built, they needed to make some changes to address development, address water. So inside the B Branch Creek, it starts up on the hill and comes all the way down to the river, right? So they've actually been what I would call a whole of a watershed approach. So they're capturing water, they've got permeable pavers in the city, so the water goes in. It doesn't actually even go into the storm sewers; it just goes straight into the ground. They daylighted some old storm sewers, which increases capacity. So now what used to be a habitually flooded problem over there, now they get a lot of rain, maybe you get some water in the street, but you don't have homes flooded out.
Right. So
you're starting to see that whole of watershed approach starting to take more hold. And one of the things we did over the past, I think it's about 7 years, us, Department of Natural Resources, the Iowa Flood Center over at the University of Iowa, and some other folks were able to latch onto some money out of HUD that talked about, okay, show us some projects that you can do inside the entirety of the watershed that limit scope of flooding, scope and scale, and make it so that these projects can go elsewhere. It's not just, only works here. Make it so it works elsewhere. So I want to say we've maybe had 6 or 7 watersheds we worked with, and it starts all the way at the field. Okay, how can we better manage water in the field? How do we, as it's moving down through the watershed, are there places where it's appropriate to let it go out of its banks? Do as you noted, let the river breathe, let the creek breathe, do natural flooding. As it gets into an urban environment, what can be done in the urban environment to slow or limit the runoff that you see? So if you look at like a lot of new construction right now, if you look at the houses, great houses, but pay attention to what's around the houses, because a lot of times you will see like holding basins and things like that, or you might see other ways of essentially slowing that water from getting into the primary driver in the watershed. So they hold it. Where I live up in Grimes, there's a nice big holding basin right across the street, and when it rains hard, that thing fills up. It can fill up in a matter of hours. But the water comes out of it really slow, so it takes it like a week to empty out. And by delaying that water, you're limiting the water that's getting in. It helps that river process the water more. So you are starting to see that there's more intentional planning happening around that factor. Cities aren't just looking at inside of their boundaries. Counties aren't just looking in the rural areas of the counties. We're starting to see more people get together and say, hey, this is our issue. How can we fix it? And so there's not one silver bullet that fixes this stuff. It has to go down multiple pathways. And by multiple pathways, you end up you can end up addressing and limiting a lot of those flooding factors.
My goodness. Director John Benson, Director of the Iowa Department of Director of the Iowa Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. You were one of those guys that has the fold-out business card, probably.
Way too long of a name.
I really appreciate you coming in here and breaking this down for us. If there's, again, this is a lot we threw at people. So if there's one place you can send them to start to learn more about what they do in the region, would that be your guys' website?
Yeah. So if you want to find out about what my department does, that's homelandsecurity.iowa.gov. Now, if you want to get into the preparedness thing on that, real simple, ready.iowa.gov. That gives you, as we were talking about the basics that we walked through those 3 simple steps, gives you a little more detail, gives you some other things to think about as you work on your family preparedness, but it's a really sharp place to start on your voyage. And sometimes just getting started and doing the simple things, just by that, you've increased your resiliency just, I don't know, factor 10, 12, 20, whatever, put a number in there, but you're making yourself better prepared.
Incredible advice. And for those of you driving, a lot of you do, we appreciate that. We're going to make sure to put all of that data at iowapodcast.com. Click the Iowa Podcast show. The show's going to be there. All these links will be there. We can't make it any easier for you. Director Benson, thank you so much for coming on the Iowa Podcast.
Thank you for having me today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And to my fellow Iowans, Iowa expats, and Iowans at heart, thanks for listening and subscribing to the Iowa Podcast.